Hi guys, I am back. I'm going to do some asks today. For this one, The Art of Suicide, you're looking for a specific episode. I'm still working on this. I'm going to try to figure it out for the next video, so I'm going to skip over this one for now. But I wanted you to know that I have not forgotten you. I just need to find the exact episode, and then I can link you to the breakdowns that I did. Okay, so let's go to the next one. I'm currently rewatching season 6 of TWD, and I just finished watching the episode where Denise dies, RIP, I loved her. And when Dwight shoots her, a blonde girl with a ponytail, in the head right in front of Daryl, he says, "And if you'll believe me, she wasn't even the one I was aiming for." Do you think that could have been the powers that be hinting that Beth really wasn't shot by Dawn and she was shot by accident by someone else entirely? The whole scene really is a parallel of sorts to what happened at Grady, so it really wouldn't surprise me. Yes, definitely. And I don't know. I was going to say this might even be where we got that, but actually, that's not true. Um, I remember in the days after Coda aired, reading a lot of breakdowns by TDers who showed that, Dawn's gun was in its holster. There's no way that this could have been where the shot came from based on the trajectory, and that it definitely seemed like it came from behind the line of gradients. So behind Dawn, you had Edwards and Shepard and, all the other orderlies and a few of the cops. And it seems like it came from behind them because none of them had their guns out until the shot went off, right? And for it to come straight high up and hit Beth as high on the forehead as it did, it had to have come from someone behind them that had their gun raised. And there were a lot of theories back then about how they might have actually been aiming for Rick because he was the leader. And so if they were trying to take him out, um, and she just because she stepped in front of Dawn and then kind of shifted to one side when she went to stab her with the scissors, she just got in the way. And so yeah, there was a lot of theories about that, and yeah, they are kind of backed up by what happens here with Denise because no doubt at all, Denise was a Beth proxy. It was a big deal. So yeah, I 100% think that that is true, and it backs up all of our theories about what did and did not go down in Grady's hallway, and that it could not possibly have been Dawn that shot her, and all of that. So yeah, I haven't thought about that in a long time, but yeah, for sure, great catch. Thanks for sending that in. Paz being separated from her love for 10 years has me worried. Sure, it's a hint at Bethyl, but they're not going to have similar stories this season and bring Beth back. Well, I think I disagree with that. And it kind of depends on what you mean. I mean, are we going to see all of Beth's story, which is very much mirrored in this story, play out this season? No, probably not. So you're right if that's what you mean. But I actually think that bringing her back at the very end of the season after all of this plays out in the last episode or two, or maybe even like as a last 5 minutes of the final episode sort of thing, or whatever they end up doing, would actually be perfect for them to lay all of this out in this way, the parallel, and then have her show up, or however they're going to do it, have Daryl realize that she's still alive or see some evidence of that or something in the last 5 minutes. I think that would just be the perfect way to do it. So I think that there's a very good chance they will do that. So I'm not too worried about it. But of course, as with all things, we'll have to wait and see. Um, just kind of a fun, pointless question. Do you have anyone in your personal life who actually agrees with you on Beth coming back, or maybe they get where you're coming from but are still skeptical? The last one there is pretty much everybody. Um, I have plenty of people who think that I'm just wrong and full of crap. That's nothing new. Most people, though, they don't really have strong feelings about it either way. They don't necessarily think I'm right, but they just don't really care. They're just not that invested in it. But there are a few people too, I will say that like they kind of want her to come back for my sake so that I will end up being right. And that's just their way of supporting me. And they don't necessarily believe it or not believe it. They just don't really care. It's just not their thing. So it's kind of a mixture of the few. I don't have anyone who really, really strongly believes it in the way I do in my personal life. Again, maybe they would if they would look at the evidence, but for the most part, they're not that into it, so they just don't care. But yeah, I mean, I have plenty of people online who believe it like I do. So, and I lean very heavily on my friends, especially my fellow theorists, for support in that. That's why we all found each other, right? So yeah, thanks for that question. That's a fun one. And I guess maybe I will add on, if you don't have anyone in your life that super believes it like you do, you're not alone. I think that's probably most of us, which is why we congregate online, right? So that's one of the upsides of the internet, if you will. If Emily isn't filming in Spain or with other cast for season 4, it looks like it will just be a short scene with her and Norman Reedus near the end. Does that mean we have to wait for a different series in the future? Well, keep in mind, as I always say, that just because we don't see her filming doesn't mean she's not filming. We have had plenty of evidence of her being in places where they're filming to do random things like cons that don't really seem worth the price she pays to get there. And we very, very heavily suspect she may be filming, but of course, we're not going to see her because they're keeping it secret. She's either filming indoors or at locations that are undisclosed that they don't even mention. Um, and we have plenty of precedent of them doing that with other characters in the past who were going to be in the show and they didn't want it leaked. So they just completely hid their return. And that was that. You know, nobody knew until the episode aired that they were even going to be in it. So keep in mind that just because we don't see her doesn't mean she's not filming. And you know, I do think that I don't know if wait is the right word, but I do think that her story and Daryl's story are going to go beyond the spinoff. I think we'll see a good chunk of it, or at least I hope we will. But we already kind of know that they're going to start reuniting characters and kind of fusing the spinoffs and people back into more either multiple series or maybe just one eventually that they're all going to be in. So it's not like at the end of season 4 that's going to be it, right? We're going to see their story beyond that. So whatever they end up getting to, there will be more. And you know, yeah, we'll have to wait for a different series to get more of it, but at the same time, I think they're putting those together and we're not going to wait any longer than we have for the next season of Daryl Dixon. I don't think it's going to be like, oh, it's going to be 5 years before we see it. No, I think it'll just be the next year or something. You know what I mean? They're really on top of it and they're putting it together. And as it rolls out, we're getting more and more details. So I don't think it's just going to be a short scene with her at the end. I think they'll reveal her before that, and we're going to get a lot more than that. That's just my opinion. But at the same time, is their entire story that they could possibly do with these two going to play out by the end of season 4? Probably not. It will probably be continued in another series. Hopefully something where all of the characters come back into one. I'm actually really excited to see that. So don't let it get you down. However it plays out, we don't know the details or how it's going to look yet, but I, for one, am here for it. Granny TWD, you mentioned you are doing a follow-up video on the 10-year separation thing. You probably remember, but in the scene in Daryl Dixon season 1, Daryl listening to the recording, holding the penguin, including a comment from the man that he and his wife would have been celebrating their 10-year anniversary in June. On a lesser note, has anyone figured out Scott Gimple's successor? He's on the panel interviews. I laughed at how much attention he and Melissa drew to the towel they kept redraping. Maybe something from the movie The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Thank you. So yeah, yes on the 10-year thing. And I think that that was very, I mean, it ended up being more important than even I thought it was. We immediately pounced on it because you know, it was a romantic thing in the recording between him and his wife because it was on a ship where they were shipwrecked. I mean, there was a lot of things we kind of pounced on, especially because that came, you guys, this is so much more potent than we realized at first. Think about the sequence at the beginning of Daryl Dixon. This is the first season, the first episode. We see him watching up on the beach from the ocean, and we hear Judith's voiceover saying, "You deserve a happy ending too." And pretty much the next thing we see is him finding that boat and that recording, which talks about, like you say, the 10-year anniversary. And, you know, I don't know that we necessarily, I don't remember if I specifically zeroed in on the 10 years. I might have because it's been, you know, even then it had been roughly that since Beth, but we're zeroing in a lot more on that now because of the 10-year thing with Paz, right? And Elena. So, I mean, for them to say he's going to get his happy ending, that's what the series is about because of Judah's voiceover. And the next thing we hear is this 10-year thing. It just goes to show that the 10 years is going to be important and that he's going to find, I mean, pretty much they were hinting, not telling us right out, but hinting that he was going to find his soulmate after 10 years. And now, I mean, why would it be somebody new if they're really stressing this 10 years ago and the person he lost 10 years ago was Beth? There's nobody else. I mean, yeah, there was like Tyrese, but clearly Tyrese is not going to be Daryl's soulmate. So, you know what I mean? It just makes sense. And now that we're doing this thing where it's a lost love, you know, after 10 years with these two in season 3, it's just getting more and more obvious. It couldn't be anybody else. Like if they were going to bring someone new in, you know, like they did with Isabel, they wouldn't be pushing this 10-year finding your love again after 10 years there was a sacrifice 10 years. They would not be pushing that, and they are. And there's no one else that could be except Beth. So it's like I said, even though we did pounce on it for various reasons and see some things in it, there was a lot more, at least for me, that I didn't see that I was like, okay, that's interesting. And now I'm like, whoa, that was huge. You know? So yeah, for sure on that. I don't know the answer about Scott Gimple's accessories. The funny thing about Scott Gimple is he always has interesting accessories. Remember, he's had like pickle pins and um, ties, and I mean, he's had all kinds of things, and we've guessed at what they might mean. And I do think that they mean something. And because he puts so much meaning into the stories that he writes and the shows he does, you better believe he's putting thoughts into his accessories. But I didn't pay attention to them very much, and I don't know what they meant. And the towel redraping doesn't spark anything for me in particular from the movie. I don't know, maybe if anybody else has any thoughts in these, let us know. So I can't really answer that, but it is kind of funny that you asked about that because Scott is so, I don't know, what's the word? He's very eclectic, I guess, in his accessories, but I do think that they always mean something. And he never really tells anyone much about what they mean. People definitely have theories, and of course, most people think they're right, but he doesn't usually tell us what they mean. So if anyone has any thoughts, feel free to send them in. But thank you for that. Hopefully, we can figure it out at some point. um, What's your favorite Bethel scene after Beth's alleged death? I mean, a scene where Daryl seems to think or grieve about Beth. Mine is 206, where Laurent sings on the guitar and Daryl starts singing too, and he gets teary and emotional. I know most people would say that this is about Isabel, but the fact that they sing a Beth thing plus the lines, "You can't get what you want," is telling me that this is actually about the memory of Beth and how he's still grieving her. I agree. I agree. What is my favorite? Oh man, there are lots. So I don't know that I can settle on just one. I'll give you a few that come to mind. I actually do think of the scene where he is sitting by the barn and burns himself with a cigarette, even though that's a really difficult scene to watch and it's very tragic. I liked it because it showed the depth of his feeling for her. You know what I mean? And there were so many people at the time. I think it had to do with a lot of the hate that we were getting online at the time who just denied to high heaven that there was anything romantic there, or he felt anything for her. And that, to me, in the show, was them showing how deep his feelings went for her, that he grieved her so hard like that. So that was one. I did really like the scene after the storm episode, their one snow episode in season 9, I think it was. Um, where he looks up at the pictures because Lydia is looking up at them. And so it's the pictures over Maggie's desk, which is Herschel and Glenn and Beth and a few others. And he looks at all of them and is kind of smiling. And then he looks to one side and he stops smiling. And no one will ever convince me that he was not looking at Beth at that point. And I think the reason he stopped smiling is because she's the one person that he really hasn't gotten over her death yet. And so like he can look back at Glenn and Herschel nostalgically and smile, but when he looks at her, there's still a lot of pain there. And so I really liked that too. I felt like that was a really, yes, sad, but also really potent hint to things. And I just remember thinking, okay, but if she's really dead and she's really not coming back, why would they need to show that? They wouldn't, that's leading towards something. So there's that. I do like this. Yeah, the scene with Laurent was a really good one. I don't know. There's so many good ones. There's so many little ones that I probably couldn't even call to memory, where we feel like it might just be something for half a second in a scene, and so it's not like some great big sequence or the entire scene or anything, but we still feel like that's what he's doing. And it seems like there's been so many of those. Another one that I really like, and I actually made an edit about this, I'll try to find it if I can to link it, was, oh, again, I'm not sure which season this was. It was probably 9 before Rick disappeared. We had a situation where some of the Oceansiders were killing the saviors and they were taking justice into their own hands because they didn't like that the saviors had been integrated into the community and never gotten justice for the people they killed, which was understandable, but it was also pretty disturbing, pretty gruesome. I mean, it was just one of those things where you understand both sides, and it's definitely a grave subject matter, right? Anyway, it was Cindy, and she killed Erit, I think is her name, Erath, something like that. And anyway, there's this moment where because this particular savior killed Cindy's younger brother, and she was yelling at her saying, I loved him, I needed him, and you took him away. And just like the look on Daryl's face, I made an edit about it because it struck me so powerfully that he was thinking about Beth when she said that. So there's been lots of moments like that, and I love them all equally. So yeah, everybody should send in their favorite moments like that so that we can like get uh, a good list of them going. But thank you for sending that in. That's a fun question. Let's do one more. Oh, this is I actually talked about this last time, and this is an ask form from Still as Wind, so I will just go ahead and read this. But we did do this in the last video. Hey girls, so Norman posted 3 pictures of constellations in his Instagram story, and they are so exciting. So we have the Pisces in Saturn, which represents going on a spiritual journey, which we already know Daryl is on. The second is the Chained Lady. She's a sacrifice, and she's rescued by uh, Precious, I think that's supposed to be Perseus, a great Greek hero, so Daryl, and she marries him. The last one is the real kicker for me, the Draco constellation. Draco guarded the golden apples that were said to grant immortality to those who ate them. I believe in I believe in the theory that Beth was bitten and survived, and she is the cure. She is the golden apple. Hercules, which would represent our Daryl, slays the dragon that guards the golden apples. This just got me so dang excited. He gave us the whole story, basically. I'd love to know what you think. Yeah, I agree. And these are super fun. And I do want to look into it more so that I can pull some more out of it. But I'm not exactly sure when I'm gonna have time to do that. So I will try. But yeah, I completely agree. And you wonder how this is gonna play out in the story. Um, who is guarding her and um how is he gonna slay the dragon? And I'm really excited to see what they come up with for this. But once again, the fact that he's posting this and no way it can be a coincidence. This is not something he normally posts. And it shows what I've always said, that he knows exactly what's going on. He knows where they're going with it, obviously. And he knows what the symbolic journey is, not just that he knows what's going to happen in the plot. Obviously, he knows that. He knows if Emily's coming back and Beth's coming back and everything, but he understands the spiritual journey that Daryl's on. I think that he contributes to it a lot. He helps write it a lot because we know that he really gets a lot of input for his character, and he is laying it out for us, like you say. But there are not very many people in the general audience who are going to understand this. They just think it's something random that Norman once posted. This is mostly for us because we're the only ones talking about it. So thank you for catching that. Thank you for sending that in. As I always say, I don't follow them online very much. I mean, I technically follow them from my accounts, but I just don't get online and look. Um, I get online to post my own stuff, and that's about all that I do. I very rarely go through my feed. So I'm glad you guys are watching this. I'm glad you're picking up on it because I would just have missed it, simply. And this was a big deal. This is a big one. So thank you so much for finding this and for doing the post about it and all of the digging. It's just absolute gold. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Hi, in the DC season 2 finale, the Dama mentions all the people Maggie has lost, including Beth, her sister. That obviously means, as she got that info from Herschel, that Maggie doesn't know Beth is alive. Do you think that's because her and Daryl and Carol haven't returned from Spain yet? Or because Maggie hasn't been to Alexandria in multiple years and doesn't know that Beth is back yet? I know we don't know for sure, but I'd love to see your thoughts on it. So what I will say is that my thoughts on this have changed a little bit. If you'd asked me this a couple of weeks ago, I would have said that I don't know. But yeah, that she obviously doesn't know she's alive. So it's either that she hasn't been back or that, Daryl and Beth aren't back from Europe yet, or, whatever the case is. But we recently got this thing from Dead City about the locations and one of them being France. We still don't know what that means. Is Maggie going to France? Is Negan going to France? Are they both going to France? Is Herschel going to get kidnapped and taken to France? We don't know. Um, but that kind of changes things for me because I feel like they told us originally that Dead City was taking place at some point in the future, and we didn't know exactly when it was or how far in the future. To me, them going to France shows that it might be more concurrent with Daryl Dixon, in the timeline than we originally thought. People were thinking this was 10 years in the future, or this was so far in the future, right? even if it was 5 or 6 years, why is Daryl going to be in France for 5 or 6 years and not see Maggie, that sort of thing. But I think the main reason they didn't want to give us a timeline is because they didn't want us to know that there was going to be a connection. If they had said, oh yeah, this is concurrent with Daryl Dixon, then everyone would have known that it's likely they're going to end up being connected. So I think that it is more current with the timeline than we realized, and that they're going to end up being connected. So if that's the case, then yeah, I mean, Maggie doesn't know that Beth is alive because at this point, even Daryl doesn't know Beth is alive. But once he does, and there still may be a few years to jump into the future, like we don't know, but um, it does seem to me that probably Daryl and Carol have not returned to Alexandria. But at the same time, it's not as far in the future as we were maybe originally led to believe. It's on a very similar timeline so that they can connect at some point. Yeah, I would say it has something to do with that. But, so yes, it is true that she doesn't know that Beth is back, but that actually doesn't bother me as much as it might have bothered people thinking this was way far in the future, because it's not, if that makes sense. So yeah, I do think that it is the case that she doesn't know Beth is back, but that's because she's actually on a pretty concurrent timeline with them, maybe give or take a year or something. I bet they're going to meet up at some point. And so Daryl and Carol have not returned yet. So you know what I mean? It doesn't bother me either way. But it'll be really interesting to see how they do that connection. So I'm excited for that. So thank you for the question, Rogue Ostrich. I was just wondering, what's the point of all of this just to bring Beth back for half a season? Is she going to get her own show? I don't think she's going to get her own show. I think, though, that, I mean, especially given what Still as Wind showed us about the constellations that Norman posted and the cure theory and everything, her story is going to be a big deal, but not in a vacuum. It's not going to be just about her. So I think it's going to be more like she's going to be connected with other characters. They'll move to, hopefully one main flagship show or something. And I think we have a lot of story left to tell as a group. I think that there's still going to be a major war with some big organization, whether it's the CRM or a different one. And they would not have set up this bite cure theory in season 5 if it wasn't going anywhere. So they're going to be dealing with aspects of the virus. And I do think that I always think that maybe it's not so much that she's immune, but she did survive a bite. And the only reason those things would be different is that, uh, Grady may have had some resources that most people don't have. So we know that they were using deep vein thrombosis machines which thins the blood. So if you're bit by a walker, they always talk about how walker blood is really sludgy and congealed and thick, and that probably makes it really hard for it to actually circulate through the veins. And that just sounds painful to have your blood congealing after you've been bitten. And they may have had, because Edwards was a research doctor, they may have had experimental medication, but they would have only had as much as they had for the experiments. And once it was gone, it was gone. And until the world comes back to what it was before, they're not going to be able to really make any more necessarily. So they had all of these medical things that might have been successful in saving people from walker bites, but they would be kind of hard to duplicate in the field. And that's not exactly the same thing as medical immunity. So, I mean, she definitely could be medically immune, as people are saying. But I also have kind of back and forth had a headcanon where, she's explaining this to Daryl or something. And she says, well, it's not really true immunity. Yeah, I was saved from a walker bite, but there was this X, Y, and Z caveat for why that happened and why it's not terribly likely to happen again. But either way, I also feel like if there is anybody at all on the planet who survived a bite, there are going to be people who want to see that person and examine them and examine their blood and all of that. So either way, she's going to be an object of scrutiny. And if it's like somebody good, like if we're talking about Hope from World Beyond or Eugene, I mean, I'm sure Beth would totally be down to give them a vial of her blood and do whatever she could to contribute. But there's going to be really bad people too, like we saw with the CRM, who are just like bleeding people dry and killing them, trying to find a cure that isn't happening. You know what I mean? So, I mean, there are so many different possibilities for how they could go with the storyline. And I just feel like either way, Beth's going to be right at the center of it. So, sorry, that was a really big rambling, but I'm just saying she's definitely going to have more story to tell, but I think it's going to be in conjunction with the bigger storyline, with the rest of the group, with this war, whatever it is. You know, there's going to be a lot. So, they're really not just bringing her back for half a season or for even one full season of Daryl Dixon, you know, however it ends up playing out. I think that in season 5 they set her up for something much bigger, and it's just taken a long time to finally get to that storyline. So, I mean, you're right to wonder because it does feel like a whole lot of work and a whole lot of energy for a small storyline, but all I'm saying is it's not in the end going to be a small storyline. It's going to be really big, even outside of the romance, which, you know, for us, most of us are just here for the romance part of it. But even beyond that, I think it's going to be a lot bigger than that. So sit tight, hang in there. It's coming. We just got to wait for it. All right, guys, I'm going to call it there for today. I will try to get one more video out by the end of the week. And yeah, I will talk to you soon. Bye.